Hey guys, tonight we drift back to a summer that smells of gunpowder and wet cobblestones. 1793. You stand in the thick, choking air of Paris, a city vibrating with fury, where words like liberty and virtue have been twisted into reasons for execution. The revolution has eaten its king and now it's chewing on itself. Heads tumble from the guillotine faster than cabbages in Laval. People whisper the word suspect the way modern folks whisper tax audit. You probably wouldn't survive this week, honestly. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop your location and local time in the comments. I love seeing where my little nighttime history crew tunes in from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge through Paris's muddy streets under the cracked bell of Notre Dame, still ringing out the revolution's hollow promise. France, 4 years into the storm it started, is breaking apart. The air smells of damp parchment and fear. Every wall is plastered with decrees, new taxes, new enemies, new heroes, and by morning, new traitors. The National Convention rules through terror now. Robespierre's sharp cheekbones are as famous as the guillotine's glint. The king, Louis XVI, has lost not just his throne, but his head, and Queen Marie Antoinette follows soon after. Even their son, just a child, is imprisoned until he wastes away in the dark. The revolution that once shouted for liberty now screams for purity. Meanwhile, France's enemies close in from every direction. Britain, Austria, Prussia, Spain, and even the Dutch Republic. Imagine playing a video game where every country's chosen enemy, that's France in 1793. And to make matters worse, parts of France itself are rebelling. The Vendée in the west, Lyon in the east, and the jewel of the Mediterranean, Toulon, down south. It's the kind of chaos where heroes are born or destroyed. In this whirlwind, the government in Paris, known as the Committee of Public Safety, demands absolute loyalty. They send representatives on mission to the front, political watchdogs empowered to arrest generals if they sneeze wrong. The army is a patchwork of volunteers, deserters, and idealists, commanded by men who used to paint portraits or run taverns. The professional officer corps, mostly aristocrats, exiled, executed, or in hiding. And that brings us to one of those curious little details historians love. France, in 1793, had more generals than cannons. Truly, they promoted people like a startup that just discovered titles. You could be a corporal at breakfast and a colonel by dinner, as long as you shouted "Vive la République" loudly enough. But amid this madness, a certain young artillery officer is about to make his name. Right now, he's still mostly unknown. A moody Corsican with a sharp accent and sharper opinions about tactics. He writes fiery pamphlets no one reads and spends his pay on books instead of wine. He's 24, ambitious, and very, very tired of mediocrity. The revolution may be devouring France, but for someone like Napoleon Bonaparte, it's also opening doors once sealed by noble bloodlines. Without it, he'd probably be a bored provincial officer counting cannonballs on some forgotten island. With it, he's about to become the storm itself. But first, let's set the stage around him. The south of France, especially cities like Marseille and Toulon, are not exactly on the same page as Paris. The locals despise the Jacobins, the radical faction running the show. When word spreads that King Louis XVI has been executed, it's not revolutionary cheers that echo through Toulon. It's royalist outrage. Toulon is crucial, France's biggest naval base on the Mediterranean, home to over 70 warships. Whoever controls Toulon controls southern France's sea gates. And right now the locals, fearing Jacobin tyranny, decide they'd rather hand the city over to the British fleet than the Republic's mob rule. You can almost hear the collective facepalm echoing across Paris. In August 1793, British Admiral Samuel Hood sails into Toulon's harbor, flying the Union Jack where the tricolor once waved. With him come Spanish, Neapolitan, and Sardinian ships, an awkward coalition, but united by one goal: strangle revolutionary France. Toulon's royalists open the gates, and soon redcoats and Marines occupy the forts and arsenals. British officers stroll through French docks, inspecting captured ships like kids in a toy store. The news hits Paris like a cannonball. Losing Toulon isn't just a military setback, it's humiliation. The revolution's legitimacy is already fragile. Now one of its crown jewels has defected to the enemy. The Committee of Public Safety demands action. Immediate, merciless, spectacular action. They send General Jean-François Carteau to retake the city. His qualifications? He once painted portraits of Marie Antoinette's dogs. Really, the man is a literal painter turned general. Because in the revolution, enthusiasm sometimes counted more than skill. Carteau sets up camp outside Toulon, surveys the enemy lines, and decides that maybe a little artistic inspiration will do the trick. Spoiler, it won't. His troops are a mess. Half-trained recruits, short on food, shorter on discipline. The artillery commander, de Martin, gets wounded early, and the remaining guns are rusty, scattered, and unmanned. The army doesn't even have enough horses to move cannons efficiently. The siege drags on, poorly organized and bloodily expensive. Every day, British and Spanish guns thunder from fortified hills, tearing through the French lines. Carteau spends more time writing reports to Paris than actually fighting. His biggest tactical achievement is painting a new headquarters banner. The troops joke, quietly, that their general's strategy is to bore the British to death. Meanwhile, Toulon's defenders are no fools. The British and their allies quickly turned the city into a fortress, anchoring their fleet in the bay while fortifying surrounding high ground, especially the hill known as L'Aiguillette. From there, their cannons can cover the harbor like a protective hand. The longer they hold it, the longer France bleeds. Back in Paris, the politicians grow desperate. They send two new representatives, Antoine Salicetti and Augustin Robespierre, yes, the little brother of that Robespierre, to fix the situation. Salicetti, himself from Corsica, knows of a certain promising artillery officer languishing without command. He remembers a sharp-eyed young man who once argued that artillery decides battles, not generals. And just like that, Napoleon Bonaparte is ordered south. It's hard to overstate how accidental greatness can look up close. A single political connection, a wound in the right place, and the entire course of history changes. Historians still argue whether Salicetti's decision was genuine recognition of talent or just nepotism. Either way, it works. So, one hot September afternoon, Napoleon arrives at the French camp outside Toulon. Dusty boots, stiff uniform, and a satchel full of sketches and calculations. He finds chaos, broken cannons, terrified men, and generals with no plan. Carteau looks him over like a man trying to guess what species just walked in. "Ah, you're the Corsican," he mutters. You nod, silent, already mapping the enemy positions in your mind. The harbor gleams in the distance, the British ships anchored like predators at rest. You know instantly what must be done, but convincing these amateurs to listen will be another battle altogether. You arrive at Toulon not as a savior, but as a nobody, another tired officer in a sea of uniforms. The Republican camp sprawls across dusty hills like a disorganized flea market, tents stitched from mismatched cloth, cannons half buried in mud, and soldiers too exhausted to salute. The air reeks of sweat, smoke, and anxiety. You can taste salt from the Mediterranean breeze and hear the distant crack of British guns echoing from the harbor. The situation is as bad as you feared. Toulon, the pride of France's southern coast, has flipped sides. Its people, mostly merchants, officers, and shipbuilders, declare allegiance not to Paris, but to King Louis's ghost. The white flag of monarchy flutters over the arsenal, while the tricolor lies trampled under foreign boots. Down in the bay, the British fleet glistens like a row of sharks. Admiral Hood's ships, over 30 vessels flying British, Spanish, and Neapolitan colors, sit anchored and ready. Their cannon muzzles look like black eyes staring back at you. You can practically hear them whisper, "Come closer, little Republicans." Inside the city, royalist leaders toast with British officers, convinced they've saved Toulon from revolutionary madness. They don't yet realize they've handed France's entire Mediterranean fleet to its greatest enemy. You trudge through the French lines, notebook in hand, counting the guns. 43 cannons, of which fewer than half are operational. Powder is low. Ammunition is mismatched. The men are brave but untrained. Farmers turned soldiers overnight. You watch one try to light a fuse backward. You sigh. The Republic's army is fighting a coalition of professional navies and foreign legions, with borrowed muskets and patriotic slogans. General Carteau still believes enthusiasm can substitute for logistics. He paints grand maps, delivers rousing speeches, and mispronounces half the artillery terms you use. When you suggest shifting the batteries to higher ground for better range, he waves his hand. "You're too pessimistic, Lieutenant Bonaparte. The English will soon surrender." You don't argue, at least not yet. You've learned something crucial in revolutionary France. Arguing with a general can get you executed for treason faster than losing a battle. Instead, you study the terrain. Toulon sits like a bowl between sea and mountains, surrounded by ridges and forts. Whoever holds the high ground controls everything below. The British have taken the best positions: Fort Mulgrave, Fort Balaguer, and the ridge of L'Aiguillette, guarding the narrow entrance to the harbor. If the French could capture those, the Allied fleet would be trapped. That realization burns in your mind like a fuse. You sketch furiously by lantern light, calculating angles and trajectories. The cannons, if placed correctly, could rain fire directly into the harbor. The problem isn't strategy, it's execution. You need guns, powder, and men who can use them. You send requisitions north, demanding more artillery from nearby cities. When no one answers, you improvise. You order carpenters to build wooden carriages from farm wagons, blacksmiths to forge nails and fuses, even tailors to stitch sandbags. You turn soldiers into gunners and peasants into engineers. A few grumble about the Corsican upstart, but soon the results silence them. At night, under flickering torches, you drill them relentlessly. "Aim low," you bark. "Fire by line, not by panic." You make them practice loading until their hands blister. Some whisper that you never sleep. Others swear you sleep standing. The truth is, your brain won't stop spinning. Every morning, you climb the same ridge overlooking Toulon, glass in hand. You study the harbor's shifting smoke and sails. Each movement tells you something: how the British resupply, where their patrols rotate, which gunboats linger near the mouth. You memorize it all. Still, your superiors remain oblivious. Carteau continues sending flamboyant reports to Paris, claiming decisive victory imminent. The Committee of Public Safety reads them with a mix of relief and disbelief. Historians still argue whether Carteau genuinely believed his own delusions or was simply buying time. Either way, the Republic bleeds while he paints his next masterpiece. You, however, see the disaster coming. The troops are demoralized, disease spreads through camp, and deserters vanish into the hills nightly. Worse, British and Spanish forces are fortifying faster than the French can even reload. Admiral Hood's men construct formidable earthworks around Fort Mulgrave, bristling with heavy guns. The French call it Little Gibraltar, half joking, half terrified. One evening, a courier gallops in with a fresh set of orders. Carteau is to assault the enemy's right flank near Mount Ferron. You propose a larger force, 3,000 men with full artillery support. Carteau laughs and insists 400 will do splendidly. The attack fails spectacularly. British and Spanish troops, forewarned by spies, unleash devastating fire. French soldiers flee, leaving dozens dead or captured. You slam your fist against a cannon wheel, teeth clenched. Not only has the attack wasted lives, it's alerted the enemy to exactly where you planned to strike next. As if on cue, the British reinforce the entire ridge, constructing new redoubts, trenches, and palisades. The golden opportunity you'd glimpsed through your spyglass fades beneath layers of enemy timber and steel. When you deliver your assessment to Carteau, he shrugs. "We'll try again later." You almost laugh, but the sound that escapes your throat is closer to a growl. Later, every day Toulon remains in enemy hands, France loses ships, morale, and legitimacy. The revolution may scream about traitors in Paris, but the true betrayal lies here, in incompetence dressed as leadership. Salicetti, the political commissioner, notices your frustration. He's sharp, suspicious, and far more dangerous than any general. He's also Corsican, like you, and that earns a flicker of mutual understanding. You speak to him plainly. "We can't win with words or wishes. We need batteries. Proper batteries. Aimed at the harbor entrance." Salicetti listens. For once, he takes your sketches to Paris, stamps them with his authority, and grants you freedom to act. From that moment, you are in charge of the artillery. You waste no time. You scour the region for spare cannons, raiding coastal forts, even commandeering old church bells to melt into shot. You rename your new positions after revolutionary ideals: La Montagne and Sans-Culotte. A little irony never hurts morale. Soldiers laugh nervously at the names, unsure whether you're joking. You are, and you aren't. The first night your guns open fire, the ground trembles. Sparks leap from muzzles, and each report echoes off the hills like thunder. The enemy responds in kind, smoke rising, shells shrieking overhead. The exchange lasts hours, then days, until the air tastes permanently of iron. Your methods begin to work. Slowly, painfully, the French regain confidence. Bonaparte's batteries become a phrase whispered with awe. You walk the lines at dawn, checking angles, adjusting fire by mere degrees. Your hands are black with powder, your uniform scorched by flashes. You look more blacksmith than officer. One morning, as the sun bleeds over the horizon, you spot something through your telescope. A cluster of enemy officers gathered near a redoubt, gesturing at your new battery. One of them points toward you, and the others nod grimly. You smile to yourself. They've noticed. Weeks later, reinforcements finally arrive. Fresh troops and, more importantly, a new commander. General Dugommier replaces Carteau. Unlike his predecessor, he's a soldier's soldier, quiet, methodical, and willing to listen. When he asks your opinion, you spread your maps before him and explain. Capture the heights of Les Guillettes and Toulon Falls. Dugommier studies you, then the sketch, then nods once. Make it happen. At last, someone understands. But time is slipping, and the Allies are tightening their defenses. Ahead lies the fiercest phase of the siege, the assault on Little Gibraltar itself, where hundreds will fall for a hill that decides the fate of France's revolution. You take a deep breath. The Mediterranean wind carries the scent of salt and smoke. Below, Toulon gleams under morning light, unaware that within weeks it will burn. You wake to thunder before dawn. Only, it isn't thunder. The guns on the British ships are pounding the shoreline again. The whole tent quivers with each concussion, dust falling like powder from the seams. You push aside the flap and step into a world of gray smoke and orange flashes. Cannon fire ripples across the horizon like some monstrous heartbeat. Toulon is awake. You've been here for weeks now, living on bitter coffee and nerves, and you know the rhythm of these bombardments. Every morning, the enemy tests your positions. Every evening, they shell the camp just enough to remind the French they're prey. The men joke that Admiral Hood must be an insomniac. General Dugommier arrives not long after, and the difference is immediate. Gone are the dramatic speeches and the useless strategy meetings of Carteau. Dugommier doesn't waste breath. He listens, nods, and acts. He inspects your batteries with the quiet focus of a craftsman, not a politician. For the first time, you feel like you're not shouting into the void. When you show him your map, the one covered in scribbles, angles, and circles around the Les Guillettes Peninsula, he studies it silently. Finally, he says, "You're right. Take those hills, and Toulon will fall like a rotten fruit. You don't smile. You've learned restraint. History tends to notice arrogance. But inside, you feel a small flare of satisfaction. Someone finally sees what you've seen since the day you arrived. That night, you gather your artillery officers and outline the plan. 2 major batteries, La Montagne and Sans-Culotte, will form the backbone of the siege. From there, your cannons can bombard both Fort Mulgrave and the harbor beyond. Once those guns open up, the British ships will be forced to pull back or face destruction. The challenge, as always, is material. You still don't have enough gunpowder or trained crews. You requisition iron from farm tools, old church bells, and even street lamps from nearby villages. Soldiers joke that if the Republic runs out of metal, you'll start melting down spoons. You tell them deadpan, only if we run out of enemies. One of them actually laughs. The humor, thin as it is, keeps morale alive. Work begins immediately. You turn the hills around Toulon into a construction site. Axes bite into trees, carpenters shape timber, and men fill sandbags until their hands bleed. Under your supervision, each gun emplacement rises like a sculpture of war. Ugly, functional, perfect. By night, you mark positions with lanterns, and by day, you adjust ranges. There's a strange serenity to it. The rhythm of hammering, the smell of pitch and sweat, it almost feels like creation. You build, not destroy. Though of course, that's a polite illusion. As days pass, your batteries take shape. You test the guns, adjusting elevation by fractions of degrees. You can tell the caliber of a cannonball by the sound it makes rolling down a barrel. The soldiers begin calling you Le Petit Caporal, the Little Corporal, half mockingly at first, then with affection. It sticks. One evening, Salicetti visits your position, flanked by aides. His fine coat looks out of place among mud and smoke. "How long until you can fire?" he asks. "Tomorrow morning," you reply. He frowns. "Paris expects results, Bonaparte. They say Toulon must fall before Christmas." You glance toward the horizon, where the enemy's lanterns glimmer like stars. "Then," you say, "tell Paris to prepare a gift." He smirks, writes something in his notebook and leaves. You don't know it yet, but that line will make it into his report, and it will reach Robespierre himself. At sunrise, La Montagne speaks. The first shot booms so loud it seems to tear the air in half. Smoke billows, men cheer, and you watch through your spyglass as the shell arcs high, disappearing into the gray, before bursting over the enemy trench. Seconds later, the British battery returns fire. The duel begins. For hours, it's a thunderstorm of iron. You adjust positions, reload faster, shout orders until your voice goes raw. The French artillery finally feels alive, no longer a collection of scattered guns, but a unified, rhythmic machine. Each boom shapes the hills. Each hit drives the enemy back a little further. Still, the British are stubborn. Their engineers, many veterans from Gibraltar itself, fortify Fort Mulgrave into an iron porcupine. Every French shell that hits seems to vanish into dirt and timber. The men start calling it Little Gibraltar, half in awe, half in frustration. Historians still argue whether the nickname started as gallows humor or bitter respect. Either way, it sticks too. Late one afternoon, a Spanish shell lands near Sans-Culotte. The blast sends a rain of dirt and shrapnel across your position. You're thrown to the ground, ears ringing, uniform scorched. When you stagger up, your cheek is bleeding. Someone yells, "General Bonaparte's hit!" You shake your head. Not yet. The soldiers laugh again, because laughing is easier than crying, and reload. You brush ash off your coat and keep working. Over the next week, you push your men harder than ever. Every night, new trenches creep closer to the enemy. You sleep in bursts, eating crusts of bread, always with your telescope beside you. You've started to see patterns in the chaos. The times the British fire, when they reload, even when their lookouts swap shifts. Knowledge becomes a weapon, sharper than any sword. Then, a break in the clouds. Literally. The weather clears, revealing the entire harbor in sunlight. You see the ships anchored in perfect rows, their decks busy with sailors unloading supplies. You can almost feel the opportunity humming in the air. You call for your best gunners. "We're adjusting for the harbor," you tell them. They stare at you wide-eyed. "But sir, that's beyond range." "Not," you say, "if you aim like you mean it." The first salvo roars across the bay. The cannonballs splash short, but the second volley lands closer. The third hits a British cutter broadside, sending smoke and chaos across the deck. The men cheer wildly. For the first time since the siege began, the enemy ships are pulling back. You allow yourself one small grin. Progress, measured in plumes of smoke. But the cost mounts. The camp's food dwindles, the cold seeps in, and disease spreads faster than bullets. You hear coughing in the night, wet, hollow, endless. The revolution promised glory. What it delivers smells like mud and fever. You write reports to Paris, full of optimism you don't entirely feel. The enemy weakens daily, you claim, though you know their ships still outgun you 3-1. The Committee of Public Safety replies with a single line: victory or death. Comforting. Still, Dugommier keeps faith in you. "We'll take those heights soon," he tells you one evening over a tin cup of sour wine. "And when we do, Toulon is finished." You nod, eyes fixed on the flickering firelight. "Let's make it sooner." The next morning, you ride the lines before dawn. The sky glows faintly pink, and the Mediterranean glitters below. Somewhere beyond those waves, the British fleet waits, confident as always. You whisper, almost to yourself, "Not for long." Behind you, cannons glimmer like steel teeth, ready to bite. You have your plan, your guns, and your fire. What you don't yet know is that the next few days will test you harder than any campaign ahead. Because before you can take Little Gibraltar, you'll have to survive it. The morning air is crisp with salt, gunpowder, and coffee brewed so weak it might legally qualify as dishwater. You sip it anyway, squinting over your map, tracing the inked ridges that guard Toulon like claws. The hill at Leguillette still looms ahead, a dagger aimed straight at the harbor. You've been staring at it for weeks, sketching it, dreaming of it, plotting how to make it yours. Around you, soldiers wake slowly, rubbing their eyes, coughing through the smoke that never seems to leave this valley. In the distance, British drums roll, steady, arrogant, confident. They believe themselves untouchable up there, and maybe they're right, for now. You stretch your stiff leg and think about the irony. A Corsican leading a French army to reclaim a French city from French rebels who've invited the British to save them from the French Revolution. If confusion were an art form, this war would hang in the Louvre. You mount your horse and ride down the lines. Men salute half-heartedly. Some still call you lieutenant, others captain, and a few, that Corsican lunatic with too many cannons. You don't care. You care about angles, wind, elevation, and whether your next shipment of gunpowder will actually arrive before you're forced to throw rocks at the British. At one battery, a young gunner asks, "Sir, do you think they'll surrender soon?" You look at him. He's 19, missing 2 front teeth, and his uniform hangs loose. "If they do," you reply dryly, "it won't be because we asked nicely." He grins, and that's enough. Morale, it turns out, doesn't come from speeches. It comes from sarcasm, delivered with conviction. That night, the officers gather in Dugommier's tent. The map of Toulon lies spread across the table, lit by a flickering oil lamp. Shadows stretch across the contours like dark rivers. Dugommier's finger traces the enemy lines. The British have fortified everything south of the city. Mulgrave, Balaguier, Fort St. Louis, all connected by trenches. If we hit one, the others will answer. You nod. Then we hit them all, at once. The generals exchange looks. It's madness, but it's elegant madness. You explain quickly. Artillery bombardment from La Montagne and Sans-Culotte will suppress enemy guns. Infantry will advance from multiple directions, forcing the British to divide their fire. And while they're distracted, your men will take the smaller outpost near Fort Leguiette, a step toward the hill that dominates the harbor. Dugommier listens carefully. And you believe this will work? I know it will, you say. You don't mention that knowing and hoping have become the same word lately. The plan is approved. Orders go out at dawn. As preparations begin, a messenger from Paris arrives. Red-faced, breathless, his boots caked in mud. He carries a letter sealed with the mark of the Committee of Public Safety. Dugommier breaks it open, reads silently, and grimaces. Cartoz is spreading rumors, he says. Claims you're ambitious, dangerous. You shrug. He's half right. The general chuckles. Keep being dangerous then. Paris can sort its politics after we win. Still, the warning lingers in your mind. In this new republic, ambition is a double-edged sword. One moment, you're promoted. The next, you're guillotined for excessive success. You've seen too many heads roll for less. But you can't stop now. Not when victory is finally within reach. The days leading to the assault blur together. You barely sleep. You draft maps, inspect batteries, and write letters to requisition more powder and shot. You even send soldiers to scavenge unused cannons from the ruins of nearby forts. When a subordinate protests that the guns are British-made and difficult to load, you answer, "Then learn British." You ride between positions constantly, your horse crusted with mud and sweat. Every clatter of hooves draws musket fire from the hills, but you don't flinch. You've started to believe the rumors your men whisper, that the Corsican doesn't die. Not here, not yet. Then, on the 22nd of May, though truth be told, the calendars have blurred like watercolor, you make your first real move on the hill. It's a limited strike, 400 men, mostly volunteers, meant to test the defenses. You'd asked for 3,000. The committee gave you a fraction. You know how it will end before it begins. The attack unfolds under an angry dawn. The French climb the rocky slope, muskets glinting. From above, the British guns open fire, shells tearing through formations like scythes. Men scream, fall, scramble backward. Smoke covers the hillside. The air fills with a metallic tang of blood and salt. You order the retreat before the slaughter becomes total. It's over in an hour. The survivors crawl back, faces gray, eyes hollow. You walk among them silently. One man clutches your sleeve, his hand shaking. "We almost had it, sir," he whispers. You pat his shoulder. "We'll have it soon." But the truth burns inside you. The British now know your intentions. They'll fortify harder, faster, and indeed, over the next days you watch through your telescope as they transform the ridge into a fortress, digging deeper trenches, building thick ramparts, planting rows of stakes. They christen their new bastion Fort Mulgrave. It's massive, ugly, and efficient. The French start calling it Little Gibraltar. You grit your teeth every time you hear the nickname. Historians still argue whether the British overbuilt the position out of fear or genius. All you know is that it makes your life exponentially harder. Dugommier visits your battery that evening. "You were right," he admits quietly. "We should have waited until we had the numbers." You don't gloat. "We can still make it right," you say, "but we'll need every gun and every man." And so, the siege deepens. Each day becomes a repetition of fire and noise. Your guns hammer the British lines, sending fountains of dirt and splinters into the air. The enemy answers with equal fury. You learn to distinguish their calibers by sound alone. The slow whoomp of a mortar, the crack of naval cannon fire, the hiss of rockets. War becomes a kind of grim music. You eat while working, bread in one hand, compass in the other. You no longer hear individual gunshots, just a constant background roar that fills your skull, even in sleep. Your men joke that you could probably conduct an orchestra using cannon fire. One night, during a lull, you find yourself staring at the stars. They're cold and perfect, indifferent to the suffering below. You think briefly of home, Ajaccio, Corsica, the smell of seaweed and fig trees. You wonder if anyone there still remembers you. Probably not, And if they do, they remember the awkward, penniless boy who spoke bad French and dreamed too loudly. The thought hardens you. You'll make them remember. A few days later, an explosion shakes the camp. A British shell lands near the ammunition dump. You sprint toward the flames, shouting for men to bring water, sand, anything. The fire's spreading fast. If it reaches the powder barrels, half the camp will vanish in a flash. You grab a bucket yourself, tossing sand until your hands blister. Finally, the fire dies. Dugommier finds you there, soot-streaked and coughing. "You're insane," he says. You manage a crooked smile. That's how they describe all successful men. He laughs, claps your shoulder, and mutters something about recommending you for promotion. Later that night, as you collapse on your cot, you realize something has shifted. The soldiers no longer see you as the outsider. They cheer when they hear your name. They trust you, and trust in war is rarer than victory. You close your eyes to the sound of waves crashing far below, the steady breathing of men too tired to dream. And somewhere in the distance, the faint tolling of a bell from within Toulon, a sound that promises both salvation and slaughter. Tomorrow, you think, the guns will speak again. By now, the Siege of Toulon feels less like a campaign and more like a fever dream that refuses to break. Days blend into one another, marked only by the rhythm of gunfire and the cries of mule drivers hauling ammunition up muddy slopes. You live inside the constant percussion of war, the deep belly rumble of mortars, the sharp cough of muskets, the ringing hiss of red-hot shot cutting through morning fog. And still, Leguiette stands. The hill taunts you like a rival intellect that refuses to yield to reason. Each night you crawl into your tent, brain humming with equations, angles, distances, powder charges, and wake before dawn with new calculations scrawled across your maps. You're 24, technically just a lieutenant colonel now, yet your plans decide the fate of an army. If that thought frightens you, you don't let it show. The shortages bite deeper. Bread runs out first, then meat. The soldiers joke that they'll soon be eating the horses, and then the Corsican. You laugh along, because laughter is the only thing cheaper than rations. You requisition flour from nearby villages, trading promises of future glory for sacks of grain. You even order an abandoned convent, stripped of its lead roofing, to make musket balls. If the nuns complain, you tell your quartermaster, remind them we're fighting for salvation. The men adore that line. It spreads through camp like wildfire, mutating into a chant, "Pour le salut," as they haul the lead away. Every evening you inspect the batteries. The crews now move with a professional rhythm that would impress even the old Royal Artillery Corps. You've drilled them to perfection. One team loads, one aims, one fires. And all three trust your voice cutting through smoke like a metronome. They call your guns the Corsican Choir. You pretend to dislike the nickname, but secretly you love it. One dawn, fog drifts off the harbor, revealing the enemy ships at anchor, tall masts silhouetted against rose-colored light. You can almost see the crews moving about their decks, silhouettes against the sails. You raise your spyglass. There's a frigate positioned too close to shore, a tempting target. You order battery sans-culotte to open fire. The first shot falls short, splashing harmlessly. You adjust. The second catches the frigate square in the hull. Smoke blossoms. Cheers erupt from your men. For a heartbeat, you think the ship will hold. Then its rigging collapses in a slow, graceful tumble. Masts sliding into the sea like felled trees. Beautiful, you murmur, half to yourself. If only art paid this well. Behind you, one of the gunners grins through soot. You sound proud, General, you shrug. I'd be prouder if it had been Admiral Hood's flagship. That small victory spreads hope. For the first time since August, the French troops believe Toulon might actually fall. They begin humming revolutionary songs as they work, their voices blending with the hiss of fuses. But success brings envy too. Rumors creep through the camp that you're ambitious, ruthless, a man who'd sacrifice anyone for promotion. You recognize the source. Jealous officers nursing their egos. You ignore them. Let them talk. Words don't capture cities. Still, you keep your guard up. This is revolutionary France, after all. One wrong word can send you from command to the guillotine. You've seen it happen. So, you write careful letters to Paris, always flattering the committee, always highlighting collective effort, even when you know the plan was yours alone. Politics, you've learned, is just another form of artillery. Whoever positions their words best wins. Mid-November brings rain, cold, relentless, soaking everything. The roads turn to rivers, wagons sink axle deep, and powder stores rot. Men huddle under canvas, coughing. You refuse shelter, stalking the lines with your greatcoat dripping, encouraging the crews, pretending not to notice the chill seeping into your bones. Someone offers you brandy. You shake your head. After Toulon, you say. You'll keep that promise. Barely. One stormy night, a courier arrives from the north with urgent news. The convention has appointed Dugommier overall commander. Carteau is officially dismissed, and not a soul mourns him. The men celebrate with stolen wine, singing bawdy songs about painters and donkeys. You watch from a distance, smiling faintly. The siege finally has a general worthy of it. Dugommier meets you the next morning under dripping canvas. His face is lined, his coat plain, his tone calm. Bonaparte, he says, we're doing this your way. You lay out your updated plan. Seize the enemy's outer forts, then drive straight for the twin positions of Leguillette and Balaguier. With artillery on those heights, you'll control the harbor and force the British fleet to withdraw. Dugommier studies the sketches for a long minute, then simply nods. Begin. Simple word, enormous weight. You throw yourself into preparation. More workshops appear overnight. Carpenters fashion wheels from olive wood. Smiths forge nails until their hammers split. You even recruit local fishermen to ferry gunpowder under cover of darkness. The British patrols spot a few and open fire, but the rest make it through. You reward them with what little wine remains. One evening, you climb the ridge behind Sans-Culotte. The sun dips over the sea, painting everything gold. Toulon glows in the distance, its harbor full of ships rocking gently as if unaware of their impending doom. For a fleeting moment, it's almost beautiful. You think, this could all end tonight if we were stronger, richer, faster. Then the wind shifts and carries the smell of rot from the trenches. Reality returns. At dinner, Dugommier remarks, "You work like a man chased by his own future." You smirk. Better that than being chased by the enemy. He laughs quietly. Tell me something, Bonaparte. If you were in Hood's place, what would you do? Leave, you answer without hesitation. Because once I take Leguillette, there won't be a harbor left to hide in. He studies you for a long moment, then says, "You truly believe it, don't you?" You meet his gaze. Belief has nothing to do with it. Mathematics does. That line, cold, certain, becomes legend among your staff. Soldiers repeat it as if it were scripture. Mathematics does. The next few days are a blur of smoke and fire. Allied gunners intensify their barrage, desperate to silence your batteries. Shells scream overhead day and night. One explodes near your post, spraying splinters that slice through your hat brim. You glance at the hole, then calmly keep writing coordinates. Missed by a few centimeters, you remark. Encourage them to keep practicing. The men laugh nervously. Humor, even gallows humor, steadies them. A lesser-known but true fact from the diaries of your adjutant. During one bombardment, you allegedly ordered a captured British cannon repaired and used against its former owners. When an aide questioned the decision, you replied, "It fired for the wrong side once. It can redeem itself." Whether apocryphal or not, the story spreads. Half myth, half morale booster. By late November, your batteries have transformed the landscape. Hills that were bare now bristle with cannon. Ravines bloom with trenches. At night, the whole coastline flickers like a giant forge. You feel it in your bones, momentum shifting, fate bending toward you. Then comes the message you've waited for. Assault approved. Dugamier's signature at the bottom. You gather your officers around the map once more. Rain drums on the canvas overhead. Gentlemen, you begin. We take the ridge, we take Toulon, someone mutters. And if we fail? You glance up, voice low but steady. Then we die trying, and the British will still remember who killed their sleep. They nod. You see it in their eyes, the mix of fear and exhilaration that precedes every great gamble. Outside, the wind howls across the trenches, carrying the smell of the sea. Somewhere out there, Admiral Hood paces his flagship, unaware that a 24-year-old Corsican mathematician is about to change his plans and his century. You extinguish the lantern, fold the map, and step into the night. Rain slashes across your face, cold and sharp. The hill waits. Tomorrow, Little Gibraltar will burn. The rain hasn't stopped for 3 days. It runs in silver streams down the gun barrels, pools in trenches, and turns every step into a sucking slurp of mud. But tonight, you don't care. You can feel it, something in the air, the strange electric stillness that comes before history turns its page. You pull your coat tighter and walk the line, torchlight flickering against faces gray with exhaustion. The men straighten when they see you. You nod but say nothing. Words are cheap this close to battle. You stop at La Montagne, the first of your 2 great batteries. The guns stand like black giants, shrouded in rain. Their crews crouch beside them, soaked, eyes hollow, but ready. You run a gloved hand along one barrel's cold iron. Tomorrow, you whisper, you'll sing. At dawn, the clouds tear apart, revealing a sky the color of pewter. The Mediterranean stretches below, calm, deceitfully serene. The British fleet glints in the harbor, neat and confident, its masts forming a forest of defiance. They don't know they're looking at their own funeral pyres. The plan is simple in theory and murderous in execution. Under cover of darkness, your infantry will move on Fort Mulgrave, Little Gibraltar. While they assault, your batteries will unleash simultaneous bombardment from La Montagne and Sans-Culotte, smashing the supporting forts of Balaguier and Aiguillette. If all goes right, the enemy won't know where to defend until it's too late. You check your watch. It's almost time. Dugamier rides up beside you, his horse splattered with mud. You're sure about this, Bonaparte? No, you answer. But certainty is for philosophers, not soldiers. He laughs, short and dry. Very well. Let's give them something to remember. As the first guns fire, the entire ridge erupts. Flame leaps from muzzles. Smoke rolls downhill like an avalanche. The roar is deafening. You stand behind the batteries, shouting adjustments. 2 degrees higher! Shorten the fuse! Until your throat burns. The enemy's return fire begins almost immediately. Shells whistle overhead, bursting in showers of dirt and rock. A piece of shrapnel whistles past your ear, close enough to singe hair. Still, the barrage continues. Your gunners work like possessed men. For every enemy shot, you send back 3. The air vibrates with heat and thunder. You can feel each recoil through your boots, each concussion in your ribs. Down below, you see French infantry advancing in ragged waves toward the slopes of Mulgrave. They look like shadows moving through smoke. British muskets flash from the parapets, cutting bright wounds in the darkness. Men fall. Others step over them, still moving forward. You whisper, "Courage, mes amis." The battle lasts all day. When the guns finally fall silent, night crawls in heavy and cold. The assault has failed. Again, the French have taken heavy losses and gained little ground. You sit on a powder crate, staring at the distant glow of British campfires. Your ears still ring. Every breath tastes of salt and sulfur. Dugamier joins you, limping slightly. You were right. They're too strong up there. They're strong because we fight like we have time, you say quietly. We don't. He studies you in the dim light. Then we'll find another way. Another way? That becomes your obsession. Over the next week, you redraw every map, rethink every angle. Sleep becomes a rumor. You pace between your 2 batteries at all hours, lantern in hand, trench mud sucking at your boots. Soldiers salute in silence. They've stopped trying to make you rest. One night, you find a boy asleep beside a cannon, his arm draped protectively over the wheel. You throw a blanket over him instead of waking him. You know exactly how it feels to be young, exhausted, and terrified of tomorrow. By December, your plan evolves. The key, you decide, isn't brute force, it's precision. You'll concentrate fire not on the fort's walls, but on its connecting redoubts, isolating it piece by piece until the defenders choke in their own defenses. Dugommier agrees. The order goes out. Construct additional forward batteries within musket range of the enemy. The work is suicidal. Under cover of night, your engineers crawl forward, digging trenches and dragging guns inch by inch up the slopes. The British see the flashes and fire blindly, turning the hillside into a storm of lead. You work alongside your men, hands blistered, coat shredded. Once, a musket ball tears through your sleeve, grazing your arm. You barely glance at it. Pain is an afterthought. By dawn, the new emplacements are finished. Jacobins, convention, and terror. Dark humor keeps the soldiers alive. They name everything after the factions in Paris. You just shake your head. If they knew, you mutter, they'd rename them anarchy, doubt, and misfire. The next day, the French batteries open fire together for the first time. The ground trembles. The sound is a rolling earthquake. Fort Mulgrave's outer works crumble under the sustained bombardment. You see British engineers scrambling, trying to shore up walls already collapsing. For the first time, their guns fall silent. Now, you breathe. Now we have them. But victory never comes cheaply. The Allies, desperate, launch a massive counterattack on the 30th of November. British, Spanish, and Neapolitan troops charge your lines in the morning fog. They hit your forward batteries like a tidal wave. For a moment, everything dissolves into chaos. Shouting, smoke, the high whine of grape shot. You're in the middle of it, pistol in one hand, sword in the other, directing fire until your voice gives out. At Sans-Culotte, the defenders are overwhelmed. You order reinforcements, personally leading them through the storm. A bullet rips through your hat, another shatters the rammer beside you. You don't stop. You leap over a barricade, shouting for the gunners to stand firm. Then you see him, a British officer, tall, dressed too finely for the mud, rallying his men with calm precision. Later you'll learn his name, General Charles O'Hara. In that instant, he's just a target of opportunity. You gesture to a nearby gunner. There, you bark. The cannon fires. Smoke blinds you, but when it clears, O'Hara lies crumpled, his sword half buried in the dirt. The enemy's charge falters. French troops surge forward, bayonets glinting. Within minutes, the counterattack collapses. You seize the moment. Advance, you shout. Drive them back. By nightfall, the field is yours. Dugommier finds you sitting on a broken wheel, blood soaking your boot from a cut you hadn't noticed. You did it, he says. You look toward the dark silhouette of little Gibraltar, still looming. Not yet, you reply. Tomorrow, we finish it. News of O'Hara's capture spreads like wildfire. Paris rejoices. Even the Committee of Public Safety sends congratulations. You receive a field promotion to Brigadier General at 24. Some officers grumble that you've risen too fast. Others simply stare, recognizing the inevitable when they see it. Historians still argue whether that promotion was earned by brilliance or luck. Maybe both. But on that frozen night, as you limp back through the muddy camp, you're too tired to care. You only know that Toulon is cracking, and you can almost hear it, like ice under strain, seconds before it breaks. In the early hours, rain turns to sleet. You sit by a dying fire, thigh throbbing, map spread on your knees. The wind howls through the tents, carrying the smell of salt and gunpowder. You trace one last line on the paper, a simple arrow aimed at the heart of little Gibraltar. Tomorrow, you whisper again, you'll sing. You stand with your boots on wet limestone, the wind shoving salt into your eyes, and you see it with violent clarity. The hill is not a hill, it's a key. Cold, simple, and absolutely unforgiving. Turn it, and the entire harbor of Toulon unlocks. Ignore it, and the siege drags on until your guns rust into garden ornaments. L'Aiguillette, narrow, jagged, thrust out like a stone finger at the throat of the bay, rules everything that floats beneath it. Capture this ridge, and the British ships lose their umbrella. Without that umbrella, rain turns to ruin. You trace the arcs in your head the way sailors trace constellations. From L'Aiguillette's crest, a battery can rake the inner roads and the narrows between Balaguer and the opposite shore. Crossfire from your existing positions at La Montagne and Sans-Culotte completes the geometry. The math is dull, which is how you know it's true. The cannonballs won't care about speeches or flags, only angles, powder, and gravity. You almost smile. Belief has nothing to do with it. Mathematics does. By now, your staff recognizes the look you get when a problem resolves into numbers. They quiet down. You unfold a fresh sheet and draw 3 clean triangles. Here for the siege batteries, there for Balaguer, and there, the dagger point of L'Aiguillette. You speak softly, because soft things carry farther in rooms full of fear. If we sit on this ridge, gentlemen, Admiral Hood no longer sits on his fleet. A mainstream fact. Every map maker in the Midi already knows L'Aiguillette commands the Narrows. Pilots have said it for decades. Whoever owns that ground decides who enters and leaves Toulon. Even merchants gossip about it over wine. A century of fishermen could have briefed the Committee of Public Safety for free. The wonder isn't that this is true. The wonder is that it has taken so long for your army to act like it's true. You put the plan into sentences short enough to survive musket fire. 1. Suppress Mulgrave and its children. 2. Crawl batteries forward under darkness until you smell British tobacco. 3. Across those final stony yards, seize L'Aiguillette, and with it Balaguer, by shock, not ceremony. Dugommier nods once, the way he does when he's made of iron and patience. Orders ripple outward. Picks, shovels, gabions, fascines. Mundane nouns that overturn empires. Your engineers groan, and then go. In the gloom, teams roll wicker gabions downhill, pack them with seaweed and sand, and build forward shelves where no sane man would picnic. You requisition anything that will stop a bullet. Wine casks, cartwheels, even doors pried off abandoned villas. Quirky tidbit, one parapet is literally a salon. Gilded paneling facing the enemy, wallpapered toward the gunners. The men call it Madame Mulgrave's boudoir and swear it smells faintly of perfume. It doesn't. That's stale vinegar. You keep the jokes moving because jokes are cheaper than quinine. When a corporal asks what you'll name the new battery if you take the ridge, you say, deadpan, common sense. He snorts, then salutes as if you've handed him a medal. Another asks whether you'd prefer the British to run or fight. Run, you answer. Fighting takes longer, and when a mule refuses to budge halfway up the switchback, you pat its nose and murmur, Admiral Hood sent you, didn't he? The men laugh. The mule does not. Each night, you walk the saps with a lantern hooded to a slit. The moon is treacherous, helping whichever army you hate most at the moment. You measure with strides, mark with chalk, and mutter distances like prayers. 300 to the palisade, 180 to the flesh, 90 to the ditch. The earth remembers what you tell it. Your officers do too. At dawn, you study the water. Ships shift with the tide the way rumors shift with Paris. Frigates and ships of the line ride at anchor in ordered ranks, stern lanterns winking out as the sky dilutes. You imagine being in Admiral Hood's boots, calm, practiced, confident, because the forts above you are yours and the city behind you is yours, and the French, for months, have been a rumor that shouts a lot. Then you imagine the moment those forts fall, and every deck officer looks up at L'Aiguillette and sees your cannon mouth staring down like new constellations. Where do you stand then? Nowhere safe. You gather your battery chiefs around a rough plank table. Coffee steams in dented tins. Someone has charitably drowned it in sugar. You tap the map. Batteries, Convention, and Jacobins will speak first. Sans-Culotte answers Mulgrave. La Montagne searches the harbor mouths. The moment their traverses hesitate, just a heartbeat, we lunge. You let the silence hang. We are not trying to impress them. We are trying to evict them.
"Sir," an old gunner says, "what if they throw their whole fleet at our flanks?"
Then, you say, we will teach them to respect property lines. Light joke 3. It lands. The men disperse, shoulders squared a little higher. You write to Paris, careful as a man shaving with a saber. You credit Dugommier, you praise the soldiers, you underplay your own part, and you emphasize one doctrine. Take the heights, take the harbor, take Toulon. You know how the committee reads reports. They prefer inevitabilities. Open debate. Historians still argue whether this concept, to make l'aiguillette the throat you squeeze, was wholly yours, evolved from Domartin's earlier surveys, or simply the obvious solution anyone competent would reach. You note the argument and return to your work. The cannon will not footnote you. Supply clause at your ankles. Powder casks are light, fuses short, wheels cracked. You order more shot cast from church bells and merchant weights. The foundry hisses day and night. Your artillery trains infantrymen as emergency gunners. Farmers become mathematicians by rule of thumb. They learn to feel elevation in their knees and drift in their teeth. You watch a 20-year-old from Arles lay a gun by sight and pluck a British embrasure clean with his second round. You promote him on the spot. He blushes, his mates whoop. The cannon grins a black-mouthed grin. A mainstream fact threads through the campfire talk. The siege has entered its decisive phase. Everyone senses it, from the washerwomen boiling shirts in brown water to the surgeons rinsing bone saws in stronger stuff. News comes that the Allied garrison is juggling national jealousies. British sardonic, Spanish proud, Neapolitans prickly. Coalition warfare is a banquet where everyone arrives hungry and nobody shares knives. You plan to provide the knives. Afternoons, you climb the rocky ledge above Sans-Culotte and listen to the harbor. War has sounds you learn to parse. The creak of cordage, the authority in a boatswain's pipe, the different tempers of mortars, French thump, British bark, Spanish cough. Today, there's a new fretfulness in those voices. Your forward working parties have been seen. Mulgrave fires longer, more erratic bursts, as if anxious to hit everywhere at once. Anxiety is a resource. You mean to spend it. Another quirky thing, a little shrine sprouts near the trail. A scrap of tricolor tied to a twig, 3 buttons, and a wax saint melted into a puddle of dubious theology. The men touch it on their way up as if tapping a doorway. You say nothing. In sieges, you allow any ritual that helps a man climb again tomorrow. Night brings a wind so soft it feels like a promise. You convene a last council in a dugout lit by one candle. Faces glow like coins at the bottom of a well. You review timings. You talk in syllables. When Montaigne walks them left, move. When Sans-Culotte kicks, climb. No heroics at the ditch. Ladders first, then steel. You look each captain in the eyes until he nods. Your voice drops. If you are thrown back, you will be thrown forward again. The ridge is not optional. Outside, the sea combs the shingle with its eternal patience. You lean against a parapet and let fatigue pass over you like a wave. The plan is right. The cost will be appalling. The alternative costs more. You think of the boy asleep by his cannon, the mule with opinions, the salon-turned breastwork, the farmer from Arles becoming a geometer by accident. History is 1,000 small absurdities cooperating just long enough to feel like destiny. You exhale and open your eyes to the dark. Somewhere below, a British sentry coughs. Somewhere above, a gull complains. You touch the cold iron of a gun and feel the rain's memory still clinging to it. Tomorrow, you tell it, because talking to iron is marginally less foolish than talking to Paris. You help me turn the key. And in your mind, the geometry completes itself. L'aiguillette under your wheels, Balaguer under your muzzle, the harbor under your thumb, and a British admiral staring at the shoreline like a man who just realized his house has only one door. The night comes down cold, clean, and quiet in the way that never lasts. You crouch by a lantern, feeling the tremor underfoot, guns being rolled into position, boots crunching gravel, ropes creaking as teams drag ladders through mud. Everyone moves carefully, whispering as if a raised voice might summon the whole British fleet. The attack is set for the darkest hour before dawn. The moon hides behind torn clouds, and the Mediterranean breathes softly against the rocks below. You can smell salt and powder, and underneath it, fear. You've learned to recognize the scent. You walk the line once more, checking fuses, touching shoulders, murmuring the same 3 words to every company you pass. Wait for silence. It's not poetry, it's procedure. The wind must drop before the first volley, or your cannon smoke will blind your own men. Dugommier finds you halfway up the slope. He looks older tonight, eyes sunk deep under the brim of his hat. "You've done all you can," he says. "Not yet," you answer, and hand him your spare spyglass. "When the ridge burns, look for the blue flare. That means the harbor is ours." He clasps your arm once, the quick soldier's gesture, then vanishes into the dark. You take your position at the foremost battery. Beside you, a gunner named Arles, the same boy who once guessed range by instinct, checks the elevation. His hands are steady, his lips move in prayer. You don't interrupt him. Everyone needs something to aim by. When the first rocket arcs into the sky, you feel it more than see it. A hiss, then a white star bursting over the enemy works. That's the signal. You raise your sword, and the world explodes. La Montagne and Sans-Culotte open together, a twin roar that splits the hills. The flashes strobe across the valley. The ground kicks under you. You shout orders into the wind. "Fuse! 3 seconds! Fire by line." The guns obey like living things. The hill of L'Aiguillette answers with its own lightning. British and Spanish batteries spitting flame. Tracers weave through the dark like angry comets. For an hour, the battle is pure sound. No horizon, no shape, only concussion and thunder. You measure progress by rhythm, the intervals between salvos, the deepening timbre of collapsing walls. Then the wind shifts, carrying the smoke away, and you glimpse it. Fort Mulgrave's left bastion torn open like paper. "Forward!" you yell, and the assault columns surge from the trenches. Bayonets glint in the cannon light as hundreds climb the slope, boots sliding on wet clay. The British fire downhill, volleys cracking like whips. Men fall, roll, are replaced by others. You move behind them, directing batteries to cut gaps through the parapets. A shell from La Montagne lands perfectly. The explosion turns a section of wall into flying stone. "There!" you shout. "Through that!" They go through. Inside the fort, it's chaos. Shouting in half a dozen languages. Smoke thick as fog. Flashes lighting faces twisted with effort. You're halfway up the outer trench when a bayonet finds your thigh. The shock is bright, immediate. You drive your pistol into the attacker's chest and fire point blank. He collapses. You stagger, leg burning, hand slick with your own blood. Someone grabs your arm. It's Arles. "General, you're hit." "Later," you hiss. "Load the 12-pounder. He hesitates, then obeys. The cannon thunders again, shaking the platform beneath you. You can feel the battle turning, like a door finally giving way. By dawn, the French tricolor flutters over what remains of Fort Mulgrave. The ridge of L'Aiguillette, too, is taken, the defenders broken, the guns spiked or captured. When the sun rises, the harbor lies open before you. The British fleet gleams helplessly below, masts and rigging sharp against the water. You slump against a wall, breath rasping, thigh wrapped in a torn sash. Pain comes in waves, but so does elation. Dugommier rides up through the smoke, his uniform spattered. He sees the flag, then you, and breaks into a rare smile. "You did it," he says simply. You manage a grin. "Mathematics did." He laughs, a dry, weary laugh that turns into a cough and signals the reserves forward. The next phase begins. Guns to the crest. More guns. Always more. Within hours, your batteries on Les Guillettes and Balaguier open fire into the harbor. The range is perfect. British frigates stagger under the bombardment. One catches fire at the waterline. Another snaps its mainmast. Smoke rolls across the bay like storm clouds. From your new position, you can see Admiral Hood's flagship through your glass. She's heaving anchor, signals flying. A forest of flags, frantic color in the morning glare. One by one, the ships turn seaward. They fire a last defiant broadside toward the shore, mostly out of spite, then slip away. You feel a strange, hollow satisfaction. The enemy is leaving, but so, in a way, is the war that made you necessary. Around you, soldiers cheer. Some weep, some simply sit and stare. After months of hunger and fear, victory feels unreal. You let them shout. You can't hear much anyway, your ears still ringing from the bombardment. You just watch the ships growing smaller, sails bright against the blue, until the horizon swallows them whole. A mainstream fact the textbooks will later polish. 18 enemy vessels survive the chaos. The rest burned or scuttled. The French capture half-charred hulks, cannon, stores, and, more importantly, pride. Toulon, the Republic's bleeding wound, is stitched shut at last. But right now, the city itself is madness. Republican troops pour through the gates, shouting vengeance. Royalists and civilians flee in every direction. Some try to escape on fishing boats, others hide in cellars. You can smell smoke again, this time from burning warehouses. Orders come from Paris. No mercy for traitors. You flinch. You've seen enough death to know when it stops being useful. You try, briefly, to impose discipline, posting guards, limiting executions, but the tide is beyond anyone's control. Each victory brings its own ruin. For 3 days, Toulon is a city of revenge. By evening of the 19th, the harbor that once glittered with masts is a forest of blackened stumps. You remain at your post, supervising the recovery of artillery. You limp, cane in hand, leg wrapped tight. Every time you climb the ridge, the wound screams, but you climb anyway. When an aide begs you to rest, you shake your head. The enemy rested, you say. Look where it got them. Dugamier's final report to the committee mentions you by name. Bonaparte distinguished himself through intelligence, courage, and the precision of his artillery fire. In Paris, the words read like scripture. Within a week, your promotion to brigadier general arrives, sealed in red wax. 24 years old, commander of a legend in the making. You stare at the paper for a long while, then fold it into your pocket. That night, when the last fires die down, you walk the captured fort alone. The stones are still warm from cannon fire. The air smells of salt and ashes. You touch one of the British guns, its barrel scored and blackened. Good work, you murmur. Now you're French. From the crest, you can see the entire bay, quiet again, smoke drifting lazily toward the sea. Somewhere out there, the British fleet is shrinking into the horizon. Behind you, France still trembles under the revolution's fever. But for this brief moment, the wind tastes clean. You think of what Salicetti said when he first summoned you south. We need someone who understands artillery. You smile faintly. They'll need more than that, you think. They'll need someone who understands how to turn war itself into an equation. You limp down the slope as the stars fade, leg aching but heart steady. The Siege of Toulon is over. A republic still stands, and somewhere ahead, Corsica forgotten, Paris waiting. A new campaign begins to assemble itself inside your skull, already whispering its arithmetic of destiny. The guns are silent now, but silence after battle has its own violence. It's heavy, as if the air itself refuses to move, stunned by what it's seen. You walk through the ruins of Toulon, your limp pronounced now, canes sinking into soot with each step. Around you, the city lies in shambles, cracked shutters, scorched docks, blackened stone. The tricolor flaps weakly over the arsenal, a tattered victory flag above ghosts.
The smell is everywhere. Smoke, blood, seaweed, burned hemp rope. It clings to your uniform, your hair, your thoughts. Men are dragging bodies from the quays. British, Spanish, French. The revolution calls them traitors and enemies, but in death, everyone looks the same shade of gray. You've seen war, but never like this. The siege was one thing, mathematical, mechanical. This is something else. Vengeance, disguised as justice. The guillotine has not yet arrived, but the committee's representatives bring their own theater of terror. Salicetti and Robespierre's brother are back in the city, reading names, signing death warrants. Each morning, the cannons that once roared at the British now echo with volleys of firing squads. They say 200 people are executed each day. Some historians think it's half that. Others say more. It doesn't matter. You've stopped counting. You try to intervene once. A group of terrified civilians, dock workers and their families, are lined up by the waterfront. You argue that they were laborers, not royalists. The officer in charge shrugs. Orders from Paris, he says. We cleanse the rot. You want to shout? Then you'll cleanse until there's no France left. But you don't. You've learned that even righteous words can be fatal in this climate. Instead, you turn away. The first volley cracks behind you. You don't flinch, but you grip the cane so tightly, your knuckles ache. The next day, the executions continue. They hang men from cranes, shoot women accused of royalist sympathy, and toss bodies into the harbor. You pass one of the piers and see the tide painting pink trails in the foam. Even the sea looks ashamed. Salicetti finds you later, in the arsenal, inspecting captured guns. His expression is calm, almost friendly. We're doing what's necessary, he says, glancing at the wreckage. The Republic survives only through purity. You keep your voice neutral. And artillery, citizen deputy, don't forget that. He studies you, perhaps hearing more edge in your tone than you meant to reveal. Then he smiles faintly. History will remember your contribution. You nod once, not trusting yourself to answer. That night, you sit alone on a crate near the water, watching the stars reflected in the black bay. A rat scurries past your boot. You flick it away with your cane. In the distance, you can still hear sporadic gunfire. Toulon's lullaby. You think of the men who fell beside you on Les Guillettes, of Arles, the boy gunner who carried you off the field after the bayonet strike. He's alive, but half his battery isn't. You wonder what he'll tell his children someday, if he lives long enough to have them. That he helped liberate France? Or that he learned how to turn neighbors into targets? The revolution promised liberté, égalité, fraternité. But here in Toulon, the words feel like broken glass underfoot. Still, you say nothing. You've seen what happens to those who question the purity of the Republic. Silence, like accuracy, is a survival skill. A courier arrives at dawn with news. Paris celebrates your triumph. The newspapers call Toulon a miracle of Republican valor. They print your name, spelled wrong, naturally. But there it is, Bonaparte, young artillery officer of genius. You read it twice, then fold the paper neatly and tuck it away. Fame, like gunpowder, burns fast and without warning. You know Paris too well to be flattered. Today, you're a hero. Tomorrow, you could be a scapegoat. You remember Houchard, Custine, even generals from the north, all executed after victories because someone in the convention found their success too proud. You decide to keep your head down, literally and figuratively. In January, the army begins to reorganize. You're ordered to inspect captured ships and oversee repairs to the arsenal. You limp through the shipyards, issuing orders, drawing diagrams, counting masts like a bookkeeper. Toulon is no longer a battlefield. It's a ledger of salvage and loss. But rumors swirl. Salicetti and Robespierre's brother are already rewriting the story. They claim the victory as theirs, painting themselves as the architects of strategy. You, they say, merely executed their vision. It stings, but you don't fight it. The revolution devours those who crave recognition. Better to let them have the applause while you keep the memory of the map that won the war. When the rain returns, you retreat into a half-collapsed warehouse near the docks. The roof leaks, the floor smells of tar, and yet it's the quietest place you've found in weeks. You spread your old maps of the siege across a barrel, tracing each line again. The arcs of fire, the placements of batteries, the perfect geometry that turned chaos into order. It looks so clean on paper, so civilized. You can't help but think, if war can be calculated, perhaps power can be too. Not just the movement of armies, but the movement of nations. What if leadership itself is a kind of artillery, positioned correctly, timed precisely, devastating in effect? You stare at the sketches until dawn, then roll them up. There's nothing left for you in Toulon now. The city is dying, even in victory. A few days later, Dugommier visits before departing north. He's proud but weary, his uniform patched, his voice rough. You've done well, Bonaparte. France will hear more of you. You nod. And of you, sir. He chuckles. If Paris remembers anyone but itself, the two of you share a soldier's farewell. Brief, wordless, sincere. When he rides away, you feel a strange emptiness. You've spent months breathing cannon smoke, thinking of nothing but calculations and command. Now the quiet feels dangerous, as if peace might demand something you don't yet know how to give. By February, your orders come through. Report to Nice for reassignment. You leave Toulon behind without ceremony. As you ride out, you glance back once. The harbor glitters faintly under the winter sun, and the burned hulls look like bones. Later historians will debate your role in the massacres, whether you approved, ignored, or opposed them. Letters are lost, testimonies conflict. You know the truth is simpler. You focused on what you could control, the guns, the strategy, and turned away from what you couldn't. It's a habit you'll refine for the rest of your life. That night, camped along the road, you take the old newspaper from your coat. The ink has smudged, the headline barely legible. You look at your name again, smaller than the stain of a cannonball. You smile, faintly. This is how empires begin, you think. Not with coronations, but with footnotes. You lie back against your saddle, staring at the sky. The stars look indifferent, but you feel them burning with the same cold hunger that burns in you. The revolution may be devouring its own, but you intend to survive its appetite, and someday, to feed it yourself. A gust of wind rattles the campfire, scattering sparks like musket fire. You whisper into the dark, not a boast, but a prediction. France isn't done with me yet. Somewhere, far to the north, Paris keeps spinning. Its committees plotting, its people starving, its guillotines singing its steel hymn. And somewhere even farther beyond, destiny is already drafting the next set of coordinates, waiting for you to arrive. Morning comes on like a drum roll you can feel in your ribs. You stand behind the line at La Montagne, cane planted in mud, spyglass to your bruised cheek, and listen while two continents clear their throats. The first British broadside lands short, geysers of water leaping like startled fish. The second walks in and hammers the slope, hurling stones and shards through your crews. Then your batteries answer, measured, layered, mean, as if the hills themselves had decided to talk back. You don't shout so much as conduct. Number 3, 1 degree right. Number 5, reduce charge. Walk them in, 2 lengths, then lift. Orders move like pulse waves down the gun line. Swab, load, run out, fire. Iron rituals performed with blackened hands. A bombardier kisses his thumb and taps the cascabel for luck. Another wraps lint around a bleeding knuckle and grins. It's fine, General. The other 9 are working. You don't correct his math. Today, morale is arithmetic's cousin. Across the water, the enemy's ships flare like struck matches. Point, flame, smoke, delay, punch. You've learned their tempos. British 32s bark with a clipped confidence. Spanish mortars cough, then boom as if surprised by their own audacity. Between salvos, the harbor breathes, canvas snapping, boatswain's pipes keening, and then the next chord crashes down. You raise your sword and the ridge answers as one, a chord of heat and iron. It isn't pretty, it's effective. A mainstream fact slips neatly into the chaos. Red-hot shot is king against wood and tar. You've had iron balls heated in braziers until they glow dull cherry, then sent them hissing into holes where they nestle in seams and set whole decks smoldering. The crews love the spectacle, hate the smell. A boy from Arles, the prodigy who can feel elevation in his teeth, nudges you and mutters, "Smells like a cooper's nightmare." He isn't wrong. Your leg, stabbed 2 nights ago when the lunge for Mulgrave finally broke, feels like someone installed a second, less cooperative heartbeat in your thigh. You test the weight, once, twice, decide pain is a tax you'll audit after victory, and lean back into the glass. The near ridge, Balaguer and its kin, throws sour smoke. Beyond them, Leguiette's profile is now yours, and the harbor mouth sits under your new guns like a polite hostage. You mark a target, a frigate that's too curious for its own rigging, and call a ranging round. The shell arcs, dips, and bursts just off her quarter. Again, you say softly. The second finds home. Men cheer, you don't. Cheering is for the ones who are done. You are not done. Counter-battery fire grows clever. The Allies have found sans-culotte and are stitching the earth around it with case shot. Dirt rains into your hair. A splinter smacks your hat brim and javelins away. You lower the glass, feel warm dampness at your temple, and realize your ear is bleeding. A sergeant offers a strip of linen. You wave it away and stuff wax in both ears instead. Quirky tidbit. Gunners swear by candle wax plugs. They dull the world just enough to keep your balance. Someone jokes that you'll finally stop talking. If I stop, you say, shoot straighter, and I'll think louder. That earns a bark of laughter that sounds like a misfired carbine. A runner slides into view, mud to the eyebrows. "Message from Dugommier," he wheezes. "Hold your cadence." Infantry dressing forward by the orchard. You scratch a note with a coal stump and pass it to Montaigne's chief of peace. "Maintain the ladder," you tell him, your shorthand for stepping salvos, so that the bursts climb a wall invisible to everyone but you. He nods, already singing ranges to his crew like a baker listing loaves. For an hour, the rhythm is clean. Your ridge, their ridge, the harbor, repeat, until a new sound threads the thunder. The violin snap of skirmish fire tucked close and low. Through the smoke, you glimpse dark masses pushing toward your forward batteries, lines breaking into clumps, bayonets up, flags tilted forward to pull men by the eyes. The Allies are counterattacking, and they are coming for your guns. Grape shot, you say very calmly as if ordering lunch. Short fuses, 2 rounds prepared. The crews pivot from geometry to intimacy. Bags rip, canisters clang, rammers slam home. At 50 yards, a cannon is not a statement. It is a shotgun. Your first grape opens like a fist. The second walks through it. The attack ripples, closes, and ripples again. You taste metal. You shout, then cough, then shout again. Voice is just another tool you sharpen by using it. A gust peels the smoke back and reveals a bright splash of officer's braid advancing in the lee of a redoubt. The man at its center is tall, composed, furious in the way danger is when it has manners. Later, the ledger will fix his name, General Charles O'Hara, but right now, he is a moving hinge. Wherever he steps, the pressure rises. Wherever he looks, enemy lines straighten as if he's combed them. You point with the cane. There Arles snaps a linstock down, and the 12-pounder answers with a kick that jars your bad leg so hard you see white. When the smoke folds away, the bright braid is a dark knot on the ground, and the hinge has lost its pin. Do you know at once that the attack has cracked? Not with your eyes. Those are busy watering. But with the change in sound. Assaults have a forward pitch. Broken assaults have a sideways one. This one skews, then sloughs back, leaving shouts and scattered fire like shells after a tide. "Advance skirmishers," you croak, and the thin line leaps, not because you are heroic, not because they are fearless, but because momentum is a real thing, and right now, it's tripping in your direction. The price arrives immediately. A shell bursts behind you and turns your staff table into toothpicks. A shard as long as your hand punches the earth a finger's width from your boot and hums like an angry bee. Another sweeps across your coat and neatly takes a button. You look down, see your uniform grinning open, and deadpan, tragic. I liked that one. Joke 2 lands tired but grateful. A drummer boy, pale as parchment, laughs so hard he hiccups, then goes back to beating the slow march that tells the wounded where to crawl. Smoke slides again, and you get a clear minute to rake the harbor. 2 ships of the line are in the act of war's most embarrassing dance. Anchors up, anchors down, cables snarling as their officers shout in 3 languages. Your new batteries at Leguillette have spooked them off the inner roads. Your old ones at Montagne and Sans-Culotte tell them the outer isn't safe either. You nudge the glass toward a cluster of launches ferrying powder. "Harbor, quadrant 4, you say. Splash the buckets. A clutch of mortar bombs lift, hang like stubborn thoughts, and blossom where wood meets water. The returns are immediate. Flame. Flail. Men overboard with arms windmilling like bad swimmers in a painting. You do not dwell. War hands out scenes you cannot afford to keep. Somewhere behind you, a surgeon swears. A lieutenant whose name you will remember every night this week and then forget forever, staggers past with his hat brim full of blood because there are no basins left. You steady him with your shoulder and point him toward the dressing station, then take his place at a piece whose gun captain has folded to the ground like a closing knife. "Elevation as before," you say. "Fuse at 3. The loader nods, face streaked, eyes clean. The barrel rolls back, steps forward, breathes fire. The counterattack dwindles to mean little ambushes. Men who won't admit the thing is over until it's over inside them. Your skirmishers peel them away with short, ugly work. You check the sun, which is the only clock that cannot lie, and do your head math. The Allies have spent a morning's blood and got a headache for it. You've kept the line, kept the guns, and kept the geometry of the harbor. It is not triumph, it is position. But position is how triumphs get their shoes on. Between salvos, a captain asks if you want to sit. You look at the cane, at the bad leg thrumming like a plucked string, at the 1,000 small fires dotting the ridge, and you shake your head. "If I sit," you say, "the hill will notice." Joke 3 is almost true. You keep standing. As the day dulls toward evening, you send a short report down the chain. No flourishes, no adjectives. Allied counterattack repulsed. Enemy officer of rank down. Batteries serviceable. Harbor under effective interdiction. Continuing fire at intervals to deny repair. Later, pamphleteers will stitch poetry between those commas. For now, your only audience is Dugommier, who replies with a single word you like better than any sonnet. Good. You lean on the parapet and let your breath lengthen. The harbor is a sheet of hammered tin. Smoke smears the sky in sallow bands. Somewhere, bells in the city try to ring the hour and can't find it. A gull lands on the wheel of a captured gun and regards you with the bureaucratic glare of a clerk. You salute it with the last inch of your linstock. It disapproves and leaves. Open scholarly debate lingers like the aftertaste of powder. Historians still argue whether today's gunnery, your insistence on layered, time-stepped fires that walked and lifted and walked again, was innovation or simply the old Royal Artillery manual executed without the old Royal officers. You won't write the answer. You'll keep loading. Dusk finally drapes itself across the ridge. You order the mortars to slow their heartbeat, 1 bomb every few minutes. A cruel metronome the enemy must try to sleep between. You feel the ache in your thigh surge once and begin to ebb, like a tide that has decided you are boring. You take that as a compliment. The men lie back in their coats and pretend the stones are feathers.
Someone, crazy or generous, passes a crust of bread across 3 hands to yours. It tastes like gunroom and victory.
When the last ember on the harbor water winks out, you close the glass and tuck it beneath your arm. Hold as set, you tell the night officer. Wake me if the moon thinks it's a lantern. You limp to your tarp, lower yourself very carefully, and stare at the dark until it has the good manners to blink first. The leg is still yours. Barely. The ridge is still yours. Entirely. And somewhere offshore, a British admiral is discovering that a fleet is only as free as the angles that allow it. The morning smells like wet canvas and singed hemp, the scent a battlefield wears when it hasn't decided who owns it. You brace your cane in the churned mud, leg pulsing that annoying second heartbeat, and watch the far slope through a veil of smoke. The enemy is moving oddly. Files that don't quite look like patrols, flags where there shouldn't be flags, drums rolling in cautious purrs instead of confidence. Your teeth find the pattern before your eyes do. This isn't routine. It's a sortie forming. You touch the parapet with your fingertips and let the stone tell you the rest. Faint tremor, then another. Columns coming at a measured walk, bayonets low, hats forward to keep the drizzle off the powder. You lift the glass. There. Bright slash of officer's lace, a compact knot of staff, and a posture that says, I've been in rooms where history breathes my name. You feel your breath go smaller, slower. They're coming for the batteries, you murmur. Let them try to take what they can't pronounce. You don't waste air on speeches. Grape ready. Fuse 3, cuts high. The crews, your black-handed choir, move without questions. Vent pricked, bag in, wad down, canister seated, run out, linstock. Boom. The first blast peels a strip off the leading ranks and leaves it fluttering on the ground like someone dropped a curtain. The survivors tighten, then climb into the teeth of the second blast. Because courage is an habit, and stubbornness is a strategy when you've run out of better ones. They reach musket distance. Your skirmishers cough their answer from the gabions. The hillside becomes a diagram you've solved 3 times already. Attack bends left to avoid the worst of sans-culotte. Right hook reaches for the blind ground under Montaigne. Center carries flags because flags pull men forward the way gravity pulls water downhill. You ride the line at a less than graceful trot, every jolt writing your wound's signature up your spine. Hold your aim, waists, not halos, you tell a company that's shooting too high. They grin, embarrassed, correct, and the next volley sounds like a carpenter knocking boards into place. Then the hinge of the charge appears. You spot him first by the calm. Men around him shout, he doesn't. His horse picks its way through churn as if it's walking a salon floor. Sword level, chin set. The whole portrait so composed you could frame it. Later you'll put the name to the silhouette, Charles O'Hara, British general. A mainstream fact sails in right behind him like a grim little footnote. 12 years ago, at Yorktown, O'Hara carried Cornwallis's apology to George Washington and surrendered the British Army. A man who has ceremonially handed over one war does not plan to hand over this hill. You point with the cane, voice low so it doesn't break. There. First piece. Kiss his buttons. Arles, your young prodigy with range in his bones, nods once and drives the linstock down. The gun's slam buckles your bad leg. White pops at the edges of your vision, then clears. Smoke folds away like a stage trick. O'Hara's staff is a tangle, his horse down, and he's on one knee in mud that doesn't care who he is. He tries to rise. A French grenadier reaches him first, bayonet leveled, then jerks it aside at the last heartbeat because prisoners are worth more than ghosts. Rough hands, a shout, and the hinge has no pin. The charge that felt like a door swinging suddenly feels like a door that forgot it was attached to a wall. The sound changes. You always hear it before you see it. Assaults under pressure go forward with a higher pitch. Assaults losing their center slide sideways with a scrape. This one scrapes. The right hook hesitates, then second guesses itself into your grape. The left goes hunting for ground that isn't there, and finds a ditch that very much is. You roll fire across their front like you're smoothing a sheet on a bed. Light joke 1. Murmured to your chief of peace, tuck the corners. He snorts black powder out his nose. For a nasty 2 minutes, they're inside the outworks. Men in unfamiliar facings ghosting between your gabions. Smoke at throat height, bayonets arguing grammar with gun sponges. You are there because you don't know how not to be. Your pistol bucks once, twice. You don't look to see where the rounds went, because looking steals the next second. Slow the sponges, you bark. Quirky tidbit incoming. Gunners jam wet sponges into muzzles and hold them there, because a cannon with a wet throat won't take a priming spark, and a cannon that won't fire cannot be turned against its owners by a sudden enemy. It's the sort of petty, life-saving trick old artillery sergeants teach when the textbooks are out of pages. A drum rattles at your elbow. A boy, half smoke and half freckles, is beating the pas de charge like he's scolding the day for being late. Breathe, you tell him. In on the left, out on the right. Light joke 2. He wheezes a laugh and somehow finds a steadier tempo. Then the counter to the counter lands. Dugamier's line coming on at that quiet, murderous walk disciplined troops use when they've decided to be the taller story. Your skirmishers leapfrog. The forward guns go back from grape to ball, and the enemy's brave, precise angles dissolve into clumps that want to be anywhere else. You angle Montaigne 2 degrees to comb the lanes they're fleeing through, not because cruelty is policy, but because harassing fire on withdrawal is how you keep the next attempt on a shorter leash. In the churn behind their breaking point, the prize moves. O'Hara under guard, coat muddy, face pale, with pain and fury in equal measures. He sees you as they hustle him past, and for a heartbeat, you exchange the look professionals sometimes give across a game that eats its players. You incline your head a millimeter. He doesn't return it, because he's a prisoner, and he has earned the right to dislike the geometry that made him one. Your staff wants you to crow. You don't. The report you scratch on a plank reads like a shopping list. Enemy sortie repulsed. Senior officer captured. Positions held. Losses acceptable. Request additional powder to maintain interdiction of harbor. Dugamier's answer arrives on a piece of paper grimy with 3 fingerprints. Well done. Clamp on their windpipe. You feel the smallest warmth in your chest that isn't fire. Approval from a man who speaks in verbs is better than a poem. The rest of the day is ugly tidying. Wounded in, numbers counted, trunnions checked, axles greased with mixes you do not ask the quartermaster to define. You share a crust that tastes like damp rope and hand back your last sip of wine to a man whose sleeve is more bandage than cloth. When a corporal asks if the captured general is the one who once bowed to Washington, you nod. The ranks murmur. Yorktown is a name even a Marseille fishmonger knows. A mainstream fact turns into morale. If the man who surrendered America now bleeds on our hill, perhaps Providence reads French. Evening drags its soft blanket over the slopes. The surgeon's saws slow. The mortars resume their sleepy heartbeat. 1 bomb every few minutes. Just enough to keep the Allied camp dreaming sour dreams. You finally sit because the hill won't notice after dark, and you let wax dull the ringing in your ears. Open scholarly debate slides through your thoughts like a thin blade. Historians still argue whether it was your fire plan that broke the sortie, or the moment O'Hara fell, or Dugomier's timed push from the orchard. 3 causes vying to be first in a chain that doesn't actually have links so much as it has collisions. You could write a paper about it one day. You won't. You'll be busy inventing the next collision. A runner from the prisoner pen arrives with a detail you didn't ask for but can't help appreciating. The British general, sir, asked what artillery officer directs this line. He fumbles a respectful shape with his hands. We told him your name. The boy looks oddly proud, as if he delivered a parcel to a king. You thank him and send him to the cook fire. It's nothing, and it's not nothing. Names are seeds. Ground like this takes seed too well. You limp the last circuit by starlight. The ridge is yours. More yours now than at dawn. The harbor under your guns feels smaller, chastened. Far out, a pinprick of a lantern winks, and you imagine an admiral on a dark quarterdeck doing math he doesn't like. You sympathize. You don't relent. Sleep in thirds, you tell the duty captain. 1/3 watches, 1/3 lies, 1/3 pretends. Like joke 3, which is also policy. He nods, pulls the blanket of routine up to his chin, and the line settles into that taut, humming quiet soldiers can make even on a screaming hill. You ease yourself onto an ammunition chest, the leg finally admitting it's attached to a person, and close your eyes long enough to count to 50. When you open them, the stars have scooted an inch. Good. The night is doing its share. Tomorrow, you will move guns forward again, stones to stairs, stairs to platforms, platforms to verdicts. Tonight, you hold. And somewhere in a lamplit tent below, a captured general who once bowed to Washington stares at canvas and thinks about how, in Toulon in 1793, the arithmetic of a young Corsican began adding up. You wake before the sun, roused by the distant groan of ropes and timber, the sound of men hauling guns that have forgotten the meaning of rest. Every muscle feels like a cannon wheel in need of grease. You swing your leg over the edge of the cot, wince, and accept that pain is now part of your uniform. Outside, the air carries two perfumes, wet gunpowder and pine smoke. It could almost be peaceful if not for the occasional musket crack echoing from the lower batteries. You limp to the parapet. Below, the harbor lies under a bruise-colored dawn. The sea is unnaturally still, glassy enough to catch every reflection of flame licking through Toulon's streets. The British fleet has pulled out beyond range, but you can still see their silhouettes, vast and solemn, anchored just far enough to show contempt. You squint through your glass. They're busy loading stores, rigging sails, ferrying troops from the docks. It's happening. The withdrawal you've been bleeding for. Behind you, the guns of La Montagne rumble one last lazy challenge. Each blast rolls downhill like thunder, leaving the mountain. You can feel the tremor in your bad leg. Careful, you mutter, half to the earth, half to yourself. Don't wake them before they're gone. By mid-morning, it becomes official. Scouts report that Admiral Hood has ordered full evacuation. His surviving ships, 18 of them, will sail before nightfall. The rest, burned or scuttled, already tilt like carcasses in the shallows. The tricolor has returned to the arsenal. Toulon, for all its ruin, is French again. You should feel triumphant, but what you feel is emptiness. Victory, when it finally arrives, sounds nothing like you imagined. There's no music, no cheering chorus, just the quiet collapse of tension, the way a bowstring hums after releasing its arrow. Around you, men embrace, laugh, cry. A few simply stare, unsure whether to celebrate or mourn. Dugommier appears at your side, cloak flapping, eyes sunken but bright. "You've done well, Bonaparte," he says softly. "France will remember this." "France forgets quickly," you reply, "but she remembers when it suits her." He chuckles. "Then may she find it convenient to remember you often." You don't tell him how right he'll be, or how costly that memory will become. The afternoon passes in labor. You supervise the seizure of enemy guns, more than 200 pieces, most still hot from yesterday's fighting. You walk the captured forts with your engineers, inspecting damage, sketching notes. The walls are splintered, riddled, but intact enough for reuse. "We'll repair these," you tell them. "If Toulon ever rises again, let it be under better management." Historians will later romanticize this day. The triumphant reclaiming of a city, the young Corsican genius surveying his first true conquest. They'll forget the smell, the mix of burnt rope, rust, and bodies. They'll omit the flies, the sickly green shimmer of corpses floating near the quays, the silence where civilians used to shout in the markets. You wish you could forget those things too. By sunset, the last British ships begin to move. Their sails unfurl like ghost wings. You and Dugommier stand on the ramparts, watching through the smoke. They'll burn the magazines, he warns. They'll burn everything, you answer. And they do. As the fleet withdraws, explosions ripple through the harbor. Fire leaps from ship to ship, warehouse to dock. The air ignites with a roar so vast it erases every other sound. A column of flame climbs into the twilight like some furious god ascending. The ground trembles underfoot. Windows burst for miles. You throw an arm over your eyes. For a moment, day and night exist at once. Gold above, red below. When the light fades, Toulon is gone. Only the black bones of the arsenal remain, smoldering under a haze of ash. They tried to take the sea with them, you whisper. Dugommier turns to you. We'll rebuild, you nod. Yes, but something else was built today too. He doesn't ask what. He doesn't have to. You both feel it, the shift, the invisible weight settling on your shoulders. The name Bonaparte is no longer just an officer's signature. It's a headline waiting to happen. Later, in the command tent, Salicetti and the political deputies arrive, all powdered wigs and revolutionary zeal. They congratulate themselves first, you second. Your plan, Salicetti announces to the record keeper, executed precisely as we directed. You say nothing. You've learned that argument wastes more breath than battle. Instead, you stare at the map pinned to the wall. Your map, marked with your notes, your corrections, your sweat stains. And you think of every man who died following the geometry you drew. If they want to call it their victory, fine. You'll take the next one. A quirky little fact makes its way through camp that night. Someone finds the British Admiral's silver tea service in a half-burned villa near the port. It's dented, but intact, and an artillery sergeant uses the pot to boil coffee for the officers. When the brew tastes metallic, you quip, that's the flavor of empire, slightly oversteeped. The men laugh. It feels good to let them. Still, under the laughter, exhaustion sets in. The siege has lasted nearly 4 months. Half the army is sick, the other half limping. Supplies are ruined, rations moldy, discipline fraying. You spend the next days restoring order, posting guards, issuing repair quotas, writing reports for Paris. Bureaucracy, you discover, can be deadlier than grape shot. One evening, Salicetti hands you a sealed envelope. From the Committee of Public Safety, he says. Congratulations, General Bonaparte. You blink. General? Brigadier, officially, for distinguished service at Toulon. You turn the letter over, staring at the wax seal. The Republic is offering you a star and maybe a target painted right behind it. You murmur, at 24. That's indecent. Salicetti smiles. France rewards results, not birthdays, but you know better. France rewards success only until it becomes suspicious. That night, you walk the ridge of Les Guillettes alone. The moon casts a silver path across the sea, unbroken now that the fleet is gone. You rest your hand on a cannon, its metal still faintly warm. For the first time, you let yourself imagine the future, not as a dream, but as a design. You see maps, campaigns, empires rising like fortifications in your mind. The same logic that captured Toulon could capture anything, if you aim it high enough. Historians still argue whether this was the moment you began to believe in destiny. Maybe they're right. Or maybe it wasn't belief at all, just calculation. The cold realization that talent plus opportunity equals power. You look toward the north, where Paris lies somewhere beyond the dark horizon. The revolution rages on. The guillotine is busier than ever. But for once, its blade feels far away. You've delivered victory. For now, that's protection enough. You whisper to the waves, from the sea to the land to the world. The wind takes the words, carries them into the night, and far below, where ashes drift on the tide,
the first sparks of your legend fade into embers, waiting for the next wind to rise. You leave Toulon behind, like a ghost shedding its battlefield. The journey north begins on a road littered with the debris of retreat, splintered wheels, broken muskets, and the stiff, forgotten dead who no one has the strength to bury yet. Every mile feels heavier, the air colder. You travel with a handful of aids, a wagon full of maps, and a limp that no amount of stoicism can hide. The countryside is silent. Villages peek from behind shuttered windows, watching your convoy pass. They've heard rumors. The boy general from Corsica who turned the tide at Toulon. To them, you're both savior and stranger, a name carried by smoke. At night, you make camp near the ruins of an old Roman road. The men joke that even Caesar would have envied your luck. You smile faintly. Caesar's ghost, if he's watching, probably approves. Ambition recognizes its own reflection. By day, you review dispatches from Paris. The words blur together. Victory, treason, execution, ration decrees, purges. The revolution is devouring itself faster than your army devoured its biscuits. Robespierre rules now through fear and virtue, an impossible combination. You wonder how long virtue can balance the weight of the guillotine. You're promoted, yes, but also watched. Every success breeds suspicion. Dugommier writes a glowing report praising your uncommon energy and talent for artillery science, but others, political rivals, mutter that you're ambitious, arrogant, perhaps too brilliant to be loyal. You know the tone. You've heard it before. Corsicans are always too something for the French. Too foreign, too proud, too sure of their own minds. Still, your reputation spreads. Soldiers you've never met salute when you pass. Deputies whisper your name in corridors. Even enemy prisoners, British, Spanish, mention you with a reluctant respect. One officer captured near the final days at Toulon tells an interpreter, the young one, he sees war like a chessboard. God help us when he learns to play faster. You think about that often. At Nice, you assume command of the artillery in the Army of Italy. The Alps rise ahead, their peaks like teeth, snow biting at the horizon. The troops there are half-starved, their boots held together by string, their uniforms patched with hope. Yet when you walk through the camp, they straighten their backs. They've heard the stories, the siege, the math, the storming of Mulgrave, and they look at you as if you've already won the next war. You study the terrain like a painter studies light. Every valley is a funnel, every ridge a potential fortress. You tell your officers, mountains are the best generals. They teach obedience to those who listen. They laugh uneasily, unsure if it's a joke. It isn't. A mainstream fact to mark the calendar. By early 1794, the Republic fights not just for survival, but for definition. The armies of Austria, Piedmont, Prussia, and Britain still press France's borders. Each victory matters less for territory than for morale. The revolution must prove it can defend itself, or die as an experiment. In this chaos, you thrive. War is chaos measured through equations, and that's what you understand best. You reorganize batteries, introduce new drill methods, replace obsolete mortars with captured British ones from Toulon. The men grumble at first, then marvel when your calculations land shells where guesswork never could. You keep refining, teaching, sketching. Nights find you hunched over paper, drafting designs for mobile field guns that can be deployed faster, turned quicker, fired longer. A quirky tidbit spreads through camp. Your soldiers claim you can smell gunpowder from a mile away. They swear you know the direction of wind by how the smoke curls off your coffee. When one lieutenant asks if that's true, you grin. Not yet, you say, but give me another war. That war is coming sooner than anyone thinks. Paris sends new orders. Prepare for an offensive along the Italian frontier. You're to coordinate artillery for multiple divisions, under generals older and, unfortunately, slower than you. You keep your opinions to yourself. Age has its privileges. Youth has its momentum. You plan to exploit both.
But before the campaign begins, a letter arrives. A formal commendation from the Committee of Public Safety, signed by Barras and Robespierre's aides. The language is stiff, but flattering. Citizen Bonaparte has displayed a genius for fortifications and attack, surpassing his years. You trace the ink with your finger, aware that the same hand might sign your death warrant a month from now. The revolution giveth and taketh with equal enthusiasm.
Then comes worse news. Dugommier, your steadfast mentor, is dead, killed by an exploding shell during the Battle of the Tech. You read the report twice, disbelieving. The man who listened when others mocked you is gone. For a long time, you sit alone in your tent, listening to the wind slide through the Alps. You whisper, "We'll finish what you started."
The army of Italy doesn't know it yet, but you're already designing its resurrection. You inspect fort after fort, noting every weakness, every misplaced cannon, every unnecessary tradition. You reorganize the supply routes, demand better shoes, lighter carriages, more powder. When an inspector from Paris protests the expense, you fix him with that narrow, volcanic stare. Cannons win battles, you tell him. Ink does not. Historians will later call this period your apprenticeship in command, the crucible that shapes your future campaigns. They'll be right. Here, in the frozen ridges between France and Italy, you learn the rhythm of armies, the way fear moves through ranks faster than rumor, how hunger kills loyalty faster than bullets, how a general's calm voice can silence panic better than a sermon. You also learn something more dangerous: how to make men love you, not through charm, but through competence. They see you working in the cold beside them, calculating ranges by candlelight, eating the same stale bread, sharing jokes about mules and mathematicians. They trust you because you don't pretend to be better, only more determined. One night, an old sergeant brings you a flask. "For the boy general," he says, "the one who makes the cannons dance." You take a sip. It's bitter, rough, and perfect. "Save the rest for the victory," you say. He grins. "Then I'll never finish the bottle." You laugh quietly, the sound rare and startling even to yourself. The weeks blur into drills, snow, and endless preparation. Then, in February, the news arrives like a thunderclap. Robespierre has fallen. The reign of terror ends in its own blade. France breathes again, uncertain, directionless, but free for the moment from fear. You read the bulletin twice, then fold it neatly. The men cheer when they hear. You don't. You've seen enough revolutions to know that silence often outlasts applause. Still, you can't help the thought rising unbidden. Perhaps now, merit will matter more than politics. Historians still argue whether you believed that, or whether you simply realized that, for the first time, nothing stood between you and the horizon. That night, as you lie awake beneath a sky thick with stars, you think of Toulon. The roar of cannons, the burning harbor, the bayonet wound that still aches when it rains. You think of Dugommier, of Arles, of the nameless gunners who never left that hill. And you understand with quiet certainty that Toulon was never an ending. It was the overture. Somewhere ahead, destiny is already rehearsing its next act. The mountains test you in ways Toulon never could. Cannonballs at least have the decency to announce themselves. Snow does not. It simply arrives, silent, relentless, a siege without flags. You lead columns through passes where the wind feels sharpened by glass, and every sound, hoofstep, breath, cough, seems far too loud in that white cathedral. Your army has no shoes, but it has faith. Faith that you will find a way to make the impossible march possible. You carry that faith like powder in a dry pouch, protected, rationed, never wasted. Down in the valleys, the revolution is still arguing with itself. Paris has traded the guillotine's roar for the quieter treachery of committees and salons. Everyone talks about the Republic. Few can define it. You've stopped trying. For you, the Republic is measured in rations, range, and results. Each morning, you review maps with frozen fingers, tracing supply lines that look less like routes and more like veins, thin lifelines running through ice and rock. If they freeze, you tell your officers, the army dies of anemia. They stare blankly until you add, keep the blood moving. Light joke 1, morale through medicine. The Army of Italy becomes your workshop. You push it, stretch it, rebuild it piece by piece. You have fewer cannons than you did at Toulon, but more imagination. You design sledges to move guns where wheels fail, reforge broken axles into howitzer cradles, teach infantrymen to read terrain like artillerymen. You tell them, mountains are fortresses built for whoever understands their echo. A mainstream fact. The winter of 1794 to 95 is one of the harshest in memory. Frostbite kills more men than musket fire. Bread rations are down to ounces. Yet your batteries stay operational, every one of them. Officers from other divisions visit to see how. You show them nothing mystical, just systems. Rotation schedules, fuel quotas, efficient powder storage, and endless attention to detail. Genius, you've realized, is 10% inspiration, 90% repetition under pressure. At night, in your tent, you write letters to Paris, to your mother, even to your brother Joseph. They all sound the same, clipped, strategic, almost mathematical. You never mention loneliness. You never mention the ache in your leg that refuses to heal. When the candle guttering beside you finally dies, you mutter, even fire knows when it's spent, and close your eyes for exactly 2 hours before starting again. The men begin to invent stories about you. They claim you never sleep, that you eat only once a day, that you can read maps in the dark by touching them. Someone swears you've memorized the angle of every valley in the Alps. You don't correct them. Myths are useful. They keep soldiers warm when blankets don't. A quirky tidbit passes through camp one morning. A drummer boy insists he saw you talking to your cannon, literally conversing with the bronze, whispering to it, as if to a lover. The rumor spreads. You let it. If they think I speak to iron, you tell your aide, they'll believe the iron listens. Light joke 2, half true, half spell. Spring finally creeps down the mountains, slow and suspicious. Streams thaw, boots leak, and the smell of mud replaces the smell of ice. The Army of Italy prepares to move again, against the Austrians this time. You spend the thaw inspecting every gun, every limber. Nothing angers you more than negligence, except hesitation. When one captain complains that his men are too tired to fight, you reply, they're not tired, they're untested. There's a difference. The man salutes, confused but galvanized. You realize then that command is as much theater as logic. Deliver the right line at the right time, and people will follow you into hell just to see how the story ends. Your new superior, General Scherer, is competent but cautious. He distrusts your youth, your accent, your growing reputation. You can feel his hesitation like damp powder. When he delays an offensive you've planned for weeks, you stare at him across the table until he finally snaps. Do you think yourself a genius, Bonaparte? You answer quietly. No, General. Only prepared. He never asks again. A mainstream fact the textbooks will later gild. In April 1795, under your direction, the French artillery smashes the Austrian positions near Oneglia and forces their retreat. It's not a grand victory, no monuments, no anthems, but it's surgical, efficient, precise. The committee in Paris takes notice. The Corsican, one member writes, handles artillery as a poet handles words. You prefer mathematician, but you don't correct them. As your fame grows, so does the envy. Letters arrive hinting at intrigue, accusations of Bonaparte's arrogance, Bonaparte's ambition. You know the pattern. Every triumph draws knives from the shadows. You begin to measure your success by the number of enemies you haven't made yet. You confide to your aide Juno one night. They call me arrogant because I act without permission. If I waited for permission, Toulon would still belong to the British.
He grins. So what will they call you when you act without limits?
You pause, then smile thinly. Emperor, perhaps. Light joke 3, but the air between you doesn't laugh. By summer, your correspondence with Paris grows more direct. You no longer write as a subordinate seeking approval, but as a strategist informing policy. You advise on fortifications, supply routes, even political maneuvering. Some deputies bristle at your tone. Others sense something new, clarity, wrapped in command. Historians still argue whether this marks your first step into politics. Some say you were already thinking beyond the battlefield, that Toulon had shown you how chaos creates opportunity. Others insist you were still a soldier, nothing more. But you know the truth. The line between soldier and statesman is as thin as the line between map and territory. Cross it, and the world becomes yours to redraw. Then, suddenly, orders arrive recalling you to Paris. The handwriting is unfamiliar, the signature smug. Paul Barras, representative of the people. You've heard of him. Charming, cunning, a survivor of every regime. The letter praises your invaluable service and requests your consultation on future operations.
You understand what it really means.
They want to see the young artillery prodigy for themselves. The capital has a new appetite for heroes, and an even greater appetite for controlling them. That night, before you depart, you climb one last ridge. The sky is alive with stars, the valleys below silver with thawed rivers. You remember Toulon, the roar, the fire, the geometry of victory, and realize how far you've come from that battered harbor. The world feels wider now, and you suspect it's about to widen again.
You whisper into the wind, Paris next.
And though the mountains don't answer, you feel them listening, those ancient witnesses that have seen conquerors rise and crumble. You promise them, silently, that you'll be different. You'll turn your victories into more than stories. When you ride down from the Alps the next morning, the sun breaks over the peaks, painting the snow gold. You think, not for the first time, that light and fire are the same thing. Only one travels slower. Paris greets you not with trumpets, but with noise. Endless, uncoordinated, human noise. Wheels clatter on cobblestones slick with rain. Merchants bellow about cabbage and candles. Pamphleteers shout new revolutions from corners that already smell of old ones. The air hums with ink, politics, and suspicion. You dismount in the shadow of the Tuileries and realize you've arrived in the only city in the world that applauds and judges at the same time. You walk through crowds that don't know whether to cheer or scowl. The uniform helps. It's worn, but clean. Your new brigadier's sash, a strip of color in the gray. A woman selling violets calls after you, General Toulon. It's the first time anyone has spoken your name like it belongs to history. You tip your hat. She curtsies without knowing why. Inside the military offices, the smell of damp paper replaces gunpowder. Clerks glance up as you pass, half curiosity, half calculation. Paris loves a prodigy, but only until it finds a new one. You remind yourself that here, survival depends less on accuracy than on timing. Paul Barras receives you with the charm of a man who's never missed a meal. His coat is too bright, his smile too practiced, but his handshake lingers like he's checking the temperature of your ambition. Citizen Bonaparte, he says smoothly. The man who gave us back Toulon. You answer with the measured neutrality of a field report. The Republic gave Toulon back to itself. I merely aimed the guns. He laughs, delighted. Ah, modesty. The rarest virtue in a general. Behind him, maps litter a table. Italy, the Rhine, the Vendée. You recognize the pattern immediately. France is winning, but not coherently. Everyone fights their own war, generals feuding like cousins over an inheritance. Barras sees you studying the maps and says, perhaps you'll help us tidy these borders someday. Someday, you echo? Why not soon? He grins again, filing the audacity under useful. Soon then. That's how Paris works. Half invitation, half trap. you accept both. For a few weeks, you live like a phantom of bureaucracy, writing reports, attending councils, listening to politicians who talk about virtue the way drunkards talk about moderation. You learn more about power here than in all your sieges. In battle, you can measure risk. In politics, risk measures you. A mainstream fact. By late 1795, the Republic is teetering again. Royalists are rising in Paris. The new Directory government is wobbling, and rumors swirl of another coup. The people are starving. The army is unpaid. You read the newspapers and can smell the next crisis forming like thunder. And you are right. It happens on a gray October morning, the 13th Vendémiaire, by the revolutionary calendar. A mob of royalists, armed and desperate, marches on the convention. Barras, now commanding the city's defense, remembers the boy general who solved problems with geometry and nerve. You are summoned to headquarters with 3 words: "We need you." You arrive to find chaos. Messengers shouting, officers arguing, politicians pacing like trapped cats. Barras grabs your shoulder. "We have 30,000 insurgents. What we have not," he says, "is time." You glance at a map of Paris, eyes darting from the Tuileries to the Rue Saint-Honoré. "Where are the cannon?" "In the Sablons," someone answers. "Across the city." You turn to your aide-de-camp. "Marat, bring them." He blinks. "How many?" "All of them." It becomes a phrase soldiers will quote for years. By dusk, your artillery lines the streets of Paris. The mob approaches, chanting, firing muskets wildly into the air. You watch them through a haze of powder smoke and candlelight, and feel that strange calm again, the same stillness you felt outside Toulon before the first barrage. You say quietly, "Give them a whiff of grape shot." The cannons speak, the mob breaks. Paris learns what Toulon learned 2 years earlier, that mathematics, applied without hesitation, becomes destiny. After the smoke clears, the city belongs to the Directory. Barras survives, grateful and indebted. You, the once forgotten artillery officer, are now the man who saved the government. Overnight, your reputation leaps from military circles to every drawing room in France. The newspapers call you the savior of the Republic. Some whisper dictator in waiting. You accept neither title, but you keep both in your pocket for later. A quirky tidbit spreads like perfume. That night, someone sees you walking alone by the Seine, coat unbuttoned, face pale from exhaustion. When asked what you're thinking, you answer, "I was measuring Paris for artillery range." They laugh nervously, unsure if it's a joke. It wasn't. Within a month, your name is on everyone's lips. Invitations flood in from salons, ministers, even foreign envoys. One invitation catches your attention more than the rest. A dinner hosted by Barras himself, where you'll meet a certain widow of charm and connections. You almost decline, until curiosity wins. That widow is Josephine de Beauharnais. When you first see her, she's laughing, a sound as effortless as silk tearing. Her smile hides as much as it reveals, and you immediately understand. She too is a survivor of revolutions. You speak little that night, but something in her gaze stays with you. The way she looks at you not as the Republic's new hero, but as a problem she intends to solve. Historians will debate what drew you to her. Ambition, love, calculation. Maybe it's all 3. You've spent your life conquering, and here, at last, is someone unconquered. The next weeks blur into a strange new campaign. Letters, visits, dances, silences charged like duels. She softens the city's edges. You give her purpose beyond survival. When you finally propose, she laughs, half disbelief, half delight, and says, "You're asking for a future neither of us understands." You answer, "That's the only kind worth having." The marriage happens quietly, efficiently, like a treaty written in candlelight. Paris barely sleeps that night. Some gossip, some celebrate, some envy. You ignore them all. You've already been handed your next assignment, command of the army of Italy. It's a disaster on paper, under-equipped, starving, demoralized.
To everyone else, it's punishment. To you, it's an equation. Italy is the perfect problem. Rugged terrain, divided enemies, endless potential. Barra shakes your hand before you leave. Don't let me down, Bonaparte.
You smile. I never repeat mistakes, citizen.
Only victories. When your carriage rolls out of Paris at dawn, Josephine waves from the balcony, hair catching the first light. You think briefly of Toulon, of the smoke, the heat, the bayonet that marked your thigh. You've come so far from that mud-choked harbor, yet the smell of gunpowder still clings to you like memory. Historians still argue whether Toulon made you or merely revealed you. But as the road to Italy unwinds before you, you know this much. Toulon taught you how to win, and Paris has just taught you why. Because power isn't seized only with cannon fire. It's seized by knowing when not to fire. The world is changing, and you can feel it bending toward you. Slow, but certain, like metal under heat. You lean back in your seat, eyes half closed, and whisper the same words you spoke years ago before the first shot at Toulon. Tomorrow, we'll make the guns sing. So, as the night settles and the fire of battle fades, let the echoes of Toulon drift into quiet memory. The smoke clears, the cannons sleep. What remains is the figure of a young man standing on a battered hill, the Mediterranean at his back, destiny in his eyes. You can almost see him still, boots caked in mud, coat torn, one hand resting on a cannon, as if on the shoulder of an old friend. He doesn't know the scale of what's coming. The empires, the marches, the coronations, the exiles. Tonight, he only knows the silence after victory, and how dangerous that silence can be. Outside your window, the world is calmer than his ever was. But the same truth hums beneath both skies. Every triumph begins with clarity, with a single thought that refuses to die. Maybe you're not leading armies or reshaping nations. Maybe your battlefield is smaller. Your work, your fears, your dreams. Still, the rule holds. If you aim carefully, act decisively, and refuse to surrender to hesitation, you can move mountains, or at least the ones that live inside you. So before you close your eyes, remember that young officer at Toulon, the one who built victory out of scraps, silence, and stubborn will. The one who believed that geometry could rewrite destiny. Sleep easy, traveler. History's noise will still be there when you wake.